World War II, an entire ethnic group was rounded up and forced into confinement for years. We're talking about tens of thousands of Japanese Americans. They were sent to internment camps after Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Many of them ended up settling here in Chicago afterwards. Fox 32's Amber Walker is here with their stories. Amber.
Well, Robin, the interned Japanese Americans were forbidden from returning to the West Coast for a period of time during and after World War II, and job opportunities in Chicago were plentiful, so thousands of them flocked to the Windy City in search of a new life. They were incarcerated for up to 4 years. Their crime, they were of Japanese descent, and although many resettled successfully, they don't want us to forget this dark chapter of American history.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941,
I didn't think too much of it.
a date which will live in infamy.
I thought, gee, here and now we're at war with Japan.
The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked.
When I was taking the bus home, people started looking at me kind of differently than normal.
That day, more than 7 decades ago, is still etched in Enoch Kanaya's memory. He was a 17-year-old living in Portland, one of the few Japanese Americans in the community when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Did you ever imagine that your loyalty to this country would be questioned?
No, because I figured all my life I was an American.
Kanaya, who is now 88 years old, raised his family on Chicago's northwest side. He was born in the U.S., but during the war he was viewed as a potential spy. On February 19, 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt issued an executive order effectively authorizing the incarceration of an estimated 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of whom were American citizens.
We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous.
This wartime video produced by the government attempted to justify the mass evacuations from West Coast states to inland internment camps, all in the name of national security.
It was just hard to believe this was actually happening.
Kiyo Yoshimura was just months away from her high school graduation.
You just sort of felt kind of odd in just having to just drop out of school and leave.
She and her family were among the first forced to leave her San Francisco community because they lived near an oil company.
They were fearful of that we might do something.
All Japanese were required to move from critical areas such as these.
Many families had only a few days to pack. They didn't know where they were going and if they'd ever return.
Whatever we could carry in our 2 hands.
And all of a sudden, they tell you that you have to move.
Thousands forced to leave their jobs and abandon their homes, farms, and businesses. They were transported en masse, in most cases, to horse racetracks.
There was my mother, father, and I, and my sister. So we got one stall.
They were held here until the Army had completed building 10 permanent concentration camps, as FDR called them.
You couldn't go anywhere. It was very regimented.
She remembers life inside the barracks was difficult.
I was angry that I had to go through this. I think there was a sense of betrayal.
Many eventually left the camps and headed east with the help of sponsors and jobs. They weren't allowed to return to the West Coast, so Yoshimura and her parents resettled in Chicago in 1945.
Chicago was a very receptive city.
Bill Yoshino in the Japanese American Citizens League says the lure of jobs brought more than nearly 30,000 Japanese Americans to Chicago during and after the war.
It became the largest resettlement location during World War II.
Meanwhile, as Yoshimura was about to embark on a new life in the Midwest, Kanaya remained in a camp in Idaho, hoping to serve his country.
When I turned 18, the draft board in Idaho sent me a draft status saying that I was a 4C enemy alien. Now I'm thinking, well, how could I be an enemy alien if my brother is already serving in the Army?
Well, Enoch Kanaya did end up serving in the most decorated combat unit in U.S. military history, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. It was a segregated Japanese-American unit, and during this time, Japanese Americans were denied their constitutional right of due process. The U.S. government did officially apologize more than 40 years later. And, of course, I'll have more on all of that in Part 2 Sunday here on Fox Day 2 News at 9. But a lot of these families lost everything and had to start over from scratch.
One of the not-so-proud moments in our history, but certainly a teachable moment.
It absolutely is.
And it's still so rarely told, these stories,
Yeah,
aren't they?
exactly.
Thank you, Amber.